business news now, and protesters return to the streets of Paris as striking oil workers take their stoppage into a fourth week. Teachers and transport workers join the picket lines. They're looking for pay rises as inflation begins to bite, even as French prices are rising less quickly than elsewhere in Europe. Nuclear power workers have also left their jobs, raising the spectre of energy shortages as the weather turns colder. And that raises questions about the very survival of President Emmanuel Macron's government, which lost its parliamentary majority earlier this year. Here's the leader of the left-wing opposition.
There is a mentality, a state of mind that is not resigned, but people are going to face such complicated things. Understand. They have to survive. 10% less salary, you can feel it, because of inflation, so everyone is adding and subtracting, so it's true that we also feel a bit trapped in the moment.
Well, let's go back to London, where Arise correspondent Laurie Laird is standing by. Thanks for rejoining us, Laurie. What impact are these strikes having? I mean, has there been major disruption?
Not at the moment, Charles. Only about half of regional rail services were affected. Although it's a little bit blasé for me to say that. If you're somebody who was affected by that, half of those services being canceled, then yes, it was extremely disruptive. But there was some movement of people around the city and in and out of Paris. Eurostar, which runs the line from London to Paris, worked largely as it should. A couple of trains were canceled. About 10% of teachers walked off their jobs. But I think the fear that every Parisian has, that French people have, is that these strikes, as they have in the past in France, could tend to spread. So that is the fear. While today wasn't too crippling, the fear is always in France that it could get worse.
Well, absolutely. I was listening to someone who said this could be the start of the type of rolling strikes that the main unions would like it to be. What are the strikers demanding?
This one is very straightforward, Charles, and they are looking for pay hikes that are more than inflation. Now, it's an interesting set of circumstances, and you and I discussed this a little bit in general terms yesterday, but looking at those oil refinery workers, many of the unions were happy to settle with Total, the biggest oil firm in France, for a 7% pay rise plus a bonus. Now, in France, that represents a small, but yet a measurable pay hike. Inflation in France is only at a little over 5%, which is the lowest amongst the big countries in the European Union. So they were able to negotiate a slight pay rise in real terms. But the hardline CGT union, and that's what we're looking at now, you can see those CGT flags, they are looking for a pay hike of 10%. And the government is saying, inflation's only at 5+%. So it's difficult for us to give into this. But strikes in France sometimes take on a life of their own. I think the fear is exactly what you said of rolling strikes. I think that the unions are also seeing that President Macron's government is a little bit wounded right now, simply because it's cohabitating with it has a parliamentary minority, makes it very difficult to get legislation through.
Well, absolutely. And as you mentioned, the government's forcing some of the workers back to work. I understand that's infuriated the unions. I mean, how will all that affect President Emmanuel Macron's government?
I mean, excellent question. And you're right. The unions, I think, are hoping that this back to work order will, bring more people to the picket lines. At the moment, the French are not supporting these strikes. About 39% support the strikes, 49% oppose the strikes. But getting back to President Macron's position, he's in a very sticky situation right now. He is not able to get his budget through Parliament. As I mentioned, he no longer has a parliamentary majority there. His Prime Minister, Elizabeth Borne, over the weekend said that she was going to, that the government planned on using a constitutional trick that would allow the government to pass this budget without going through Parliament. It's a constitutional fluke. The government can ram this through. The risk is, though, if the government were to take this opportunity to bypass Parliament, that minority parties or majority parties in the Parliament could then call a confidence vote. So it's not smooth sailing at the moment for President Macron.
Laurie, thanks very much indeed. Laurie Laird, Arise correspondent, talking to me there from London.